Welcome into Rounding the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust. My name is Joel Goldberg. Happy Thursday, everyone. These days, I know that there was a point where no one could remember what day of the week it was. I think we've moved past that for the most part, but it just feels like, at least to me, as a guy that's used to my summer being defined by baseball, that these weeks now and months, which seem to be taking so long, seem to be flying by. So maybe that's just life. And I think, Jeff Montgomery, my broadcast partner, was my guest to talk about the economics of baseball yesterday. There's not news yet, although the Royals, I know this isn't a Royals show, by all accounts, were able to grab two phenomenal draft picks yesterday, which is really exciting. Possibly the best pitcher in the draft, a left-handed pitcher, and also a college shortstop. That's just what was on my mind today, in part because I do think we're getting closer to baseball. And I hope by the end of this week or by early next week, we will have a deal to talk about. Either way, my friends at Enterprise Bank and Trust can certainly help you with your deals. Hashtag no stopping you. If you are hungry, I'm always hungry, unfortunately. Casey Cattle Company up in Weston, Missouri is a great place to go. Veteran-owned and operated, led by former U.S. Army Ranger Patrick Montgomery. It is Wagyu beef. They've got burgers, they've got steaks, they've got bacon cheeseburger brats, award-winning hot dogs. So go online or check them on social media. If they're out of whatever you're looking for, just keep checking back or sign up for their newsletter. They're in high demand, and there's a reason for it. So really love what they do. And then over at JJ's Wine and Spirits in Overland Park, southwest corner of College and Antioch. Yesterday was Wine Wednesday, 15% off all bottles. Whenever you go in there, you'll get that personal service to help you out. They'll pick out what you need. They'll help talk you through it. So check them out, JJ's Wine and Spirits. They also have a Facebook page in Johnson County. My guest today is not in the world of sports, but he was. And, so one of the reasons why I'm excited to bring him in, one, he's got an awesome story. And really building a phenomenal career. But I've so often said that there's so many lessons in sports that transfer to the business, or what I like to call the quote-unquote real world. And those that have been in locker rooms, and that includes me from a standpoint of covering these guys for years, just have a different background. And very much like the military, that those that can make that transition, either from military into civilian life in business or leadership, same from athletics. Not everyone's able to do it. But when they do, they just have a framework of teamwork and culture that is unique. It's what I talk to companies about. It's what I love in terms of connecting those dots. So I'm happy to bring in right now Logan Freeman, who is in real estate, Live Free Investments. And Logan, it's great to visit with you. I know that, well, we're not first starting here because we did your podcast first. And so I definitely want to be able to promote that at some point. But how are you doing amidst all of this chaos, pandemic, business, baby on the way, young one at home? There's a lot going on in your world like everyone else's. So how are you doing?
Man, I'm actually energized, thriving, and focused. I've had a great week so far, and probably interestingly enough, this opportunity, I'm looking at it as an opportunity because there's less competition out there in the marketplace, because uncertainty in the economy, uncertainty in the social world, it keeps a lot of people kind of on the sidelines. And so for us, it's a really great opportunity for us to continue to take that strategic, massive action. So it's actually opened up quite a few doors for us, on the business side of things. And it also has opened up a lot of doors for us from a diversity standpoint, talking with a lot of people about issues that, we haven't talked about before. So I've got, people in masterminds that I'm a part of that live on, on different coasts. I've got investors on different coasts. And one thing that I really, that rings true for me is during these periods of time that Wayne Dyer said is to be open to everything and attached to nothing. And so being a Midwest boy, I grew up in Jefferson City, Missouri, and threw hay up on the truck to make money. And I had a very small kind of minded world. And as I've moved to Kansas City, I've interacted with a lot of people. That worldview has just been expanded. And that just has been even illustrated more, I think, during this period of time where I've been able to have conversations with people who are going through much tougher situations than myself. So I've looked at this time as an opportunity to grow personally, but also professionally.
Great way to start on the podcast, by the way. You came out swinging for the fences, which wasn't really your sport, or maybe you did. Did you play baseball at all?
I did play a little baseball from
Okay.
in grade school, and I played a couple years in high school. But I don't have the best eyes, and I didn't know that until I went to the doctor, and they're like, "Holy cow, man, you need some glasses or something." And so I couldn't hit a curveball to save my life. But when I connected, I hit it pretty far, but I didn't connect very much. So, but I love baseball. Still to this day, love baseball.
Well, the big boys, when they can connect on the golf
Then you
course,
can.
on the baseball field, they can connect. I want to cover your background because there's so many layers to it, and so I think first and foremost, where I want to go with that is having spent some time in the NFL,
Yeah.
having been an undrafted free agent. Take me through a little bit of that journey because I've always had such a love and appreciation for the athletes that weren't chosen but still defied the odds. And so you were able to do that. And maybe there's a bit of that you take with you in business now too.
Yeah. I've never been what I would call the most naturally gifted athlete, right? I was always the guy that would be willing to work harder than the other folks. And I know that you probably hear that a lot, but it's the athletes that are not only naturally gifted, but have that same mentality that are playing on the screens typically. And what I got was a shot, and I got a shot through high school as a football player. I played basketball all the way up until my sophomore year. I didn't play football in high school until sophomore year. And so I started on JV, and then, I played 3 seasons in high school and then got picked up to play in college. And so I had this kind of chip on my shoulder, and I didn't know what I didn't know, but I did know that if I continued to work hard in the weight room, work hard at practice, that, probably good things would happen for me. And so, coming out of high school, I was a left tackle in high school and undersized for, a Division I athlete. I had some walk-on offers at Mizzou and K-State, but I was looking at this. I didn't have any money. My family didn't have any money. I needed to get some money for school. And so there was an opportunity at the Division II level for me to kind of step in and have an impact on, day one. And I was like, man, I could go to Mizzou. I could go to K-State. I could probably be there. It'd probably take 2 to 3 seasons before I kind of get a shot. But at Central Missouri or Northwest Missouri State, where I was looking at those 2 schools, I really felt like I had an opportunity kind of day one to have an impact. And so, and I got a nice scholarship for my academics, to go to school. So that's the route that I went. So I've always had this kind of underdog mentality because I had a couple buddies who went, from the same team, went to Division I and played there and, had decent careers. But I've always wanted to make sure I had an impact where I was at. So at Central Missouri, I was a big kid. I put some weight on, really started hitting the weights really hard and was very dedicated. And I came in day one and was able to beat out a couple sophomore, juniors, seniors on the offensive line and got that I got that red shirt pulled. And so I played in some games my freshman year. Unfortunately, broken ankle and tore a meniscus or, an MCL, I think is what it was in my knee. And so I had to sit on the sidelines, but that allowed me to get another year after that and get that medical red shirt, which really helped me blossom into a real player. Physically, it was great to have that extra time, but it was mentally, it was the leadership aspect, it was the mentality, it was the next play, it was all of that type of stuff that I gained from these new coaches that came in at Central Missouri that allowed me to kind of elevate my game to a level where any NFL scout would want to look at it, because I physically was not like a super gifted guy. It was just more or less the way I played and the tenacity that I brought to the football field.
So what was your playing weight? Let's say when the NFL draft happened, which was what year for you?
It was 2013.
Okay, so 2013, coming out of Central Missouri, you're not drafted. I know that you end up with the Oakland Raiders.
Yep.
What was your size at that point? And then what happened with the process of going from undrafted? Did you think you might get drafted, or how did that all play out?
Yeah, so scouts always came over to the campus and they would start watching, on their tours. They watched people, and I was going in to watch some film one day, and one of the coaches said, "Hey, I asked them, I said, hey, I saw some scouts here. Who are they here to see?" And they said, "They're here to, see you, son." And I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." And I definitely practiced harder that day than I ever did, But so what's interesting, Joel, is that the NFL has a combine that you don't see. And it's called the Super Regional Combine. So they have these tryout combines that you can get invited to. So I actually had to drive up to Cleveland. It was actually Bethea, I think, or Bethera, right outside of Cleveland, where their facilities were. And so I drove up there with a buddy, and I actually went to this combine to get kind of picked to go to the super regional combine. So I went to this regional combine. I had a great showing. And then we went to the super regional combine, and Dallas's new stadium had just been built. And so I got to go to, their brand new facility down there to have what they call the super regional combine. So everybody sees the one in Indianapolis that's on ESPN and everything, but nobody hears about the super regional combine that the NFL puts on. And so I went up to, Ohio, did well, and got invited to go down to Dallas, which was super exciting for me. And at that time, I was 335 pounds, and I ran a 5 flat 40 at the super regional combine, bench pressed 225 29 times, and I jumped 27 inches. So, I'd really focused on my showing out from a skill standpoint. That put me at the number one center at the super regional combine, which was super exciting. But that's kind of how I got, into the process. And I had an agent at the same time. I still remember the guy's name. He represented me and got me kind of some more looks and things like that. And there was talk that I was going to be picked as a 6th or 7th round kind of guy. And a couple just guys got picked in front of me. So right when the draft ended, I got a call from my agent and said, "Hey, there's a team that wants to have you out for a rookie mini camp and pick you up as an undrafted free agent." I said, "Oh, that's great. Who is it?" And being a Chiefs guy and growing up and going to St. Louis and going to the I guess it would be the high school championship they used to have at Edward Jones Stadium over there. So I would always go to those, but I was always a Chiefs guy. And and so whenever they called and said Oakland Raiders, I was like, man, could you get any other team like that was interested? But you don't say no to that. So really it was basically a call. I talked to the coaches that same night. I still remember I was in Warrensburg, and man, my buddies and I, we really went out that night and definitely celebrated. But that was in, I guess it was April is when that happens, I think, typically. And then, you're out there 2 months later after school is over, and they fly you out, and then this camp starts. So it starts with rookie mini camp. So all the rookies are out there, all the undrafted free agents are out there, and there's a lot of guys, that are there, and a lot of guys at your position because they want to see who's, because film can only show you so much. And when you actually get on a field, you might look the part, but you might not be able to block. You might not be able to run. You might not be able to move. And so, that was an interesting period of time. It was when Tony Sperano was the offensive line coach. Tony actually lost his battle with I think he had heart issues, and he passed away, which is kind of crazy to think about. But at the same time, he was one tough coach. He was a head coach for the Miami Dolphins for a while, but he was the offensive line coach, and he was so mean to some of these guys, and me included, that he broke them. And I think it was his goal to break them mentally. And so I went back to the hotel that night after the first practice, which the practices weren't that difficult. The physicality of it was, I was pretty well in line with most of the people. It was the film room that would break your soul. And it was the mental aspect that Tony Soprano would put you on the spot and just take you from your high horse where you were at down to the low man on the totem pole. And I remember going back to the hotel room that night, 3 guys that were undrafted free agents, they were packing their bags. And I'm like, did you get cut already? They're like, no, we just can't handle this. 3 guys went home after day 1. After day 3, over 7 guys that were undrafted free agents on the offensive line were gone. And so it was just this what I call battlefield every single day, but more of a mental battlefield than anything. And so I was able to make it through a lot of those different kind of cuts on the rookie mini camp and beat out a couple guys that were drafted, which I was super excited about. They left, but then ultimately, I actually moved from center over to guard while I was out there. I didn't have any experience at guard, and one big boy from Texas Tech, he took my spot, and I got sent home, which was totally fine. He was a better player at guard than I ever was. But that's kind of the process that I was out there. So it was a couple weeks, 3-4 weeks maybe at most, that I was out there in Oakland doing the rookie mini camp and a little bit afterwards.
I wonder how much that experience shaped you today, and we'll certainly get into your real estate endeavors and everything you're doing in a bit. I'm going a little bit chronological here. We don't have to, but sure. I just wonder, going through a process like that, I talked about all the teamwork, but when you get into a room, with a coach like that who is breaking you down, Did you learn and take away from that positives, negatives? Did it influence you in ways to do things or not do things?
Yeah, it did. It absolutely did. And I would say the biggest one was, there's a song that says, your stuff stinks like everybody else's, right? When you think it doesn't, that's when you're putting yourself in a vulnerable position. And coming from a Division II world, had a great showing at the Super Regional Combine. My numbers look better than Travis Fredericks did on at the NFL Combine. I was really feeling good about myself. When I got out there, I learned two things. One, there was a different level of football that I had never seen before, and it was more or less the speed. You didn't have time to respond to a situation. You had to react. And in Division II football, I was able to respond and still beat the other guy. In Division I football, and then when you get to the NFL, the best of the best Division I guys, there's no time to respond. So in life, you have to be able to, and I kind of attribute this to the business world as well. When there's things that are happening, you obviously need to respond in the right way sometimes. But sometimes if you take too much time to respond and you don't know how to react and you don't have the experience on what to do, and those reactions aren't quote unquote instinctive, you're going to get left behind. And so those guys and gals that are always winning in business, always winning at life, it's because they're not responding. They're not taking all the information in and saying, okay, I'm going to make a hypothesis about this. I'm going to test it for 2 weeks, and then I'm going to go make a decision. It's the ones that are, hey, I know what I need to do. I've been here before. I can react to this in the right way, and they're moving forward, and they don't question themselves. So that was one of the biggest kind of takeaways that I got from being out there. And then the second piece was, when you think that you are better than everybody else and you haven't really tested yourself against that, you have to be really honest about that with yourself, because you think about this in the business world and you're like, man, how do those people always get those projects? Like, how are they raising this money? How are they doing this? It seems like they're just rocking and rolling. It seems easy to them. And I think people might seem like that, think that might be the position I'm in sometime with the projects that we've got going. But it's not because it's easy. It's because we put in the work and we're ready and we're vulnerable and we take coaching the right way. If I could go back to that being an undrafted free agent and I could just have somebody slap me in the face and knock me right down off that high pedestal, I guarantee you I'd still be playing football in the NFL today. But it was because I thought I was better than other people. I knew better than them. I wasn't willing to take all the coaching that I should have, implement it, that I got cut. And the other guy didn't. And so maybe that happened for a reason. But in my life today now, it's like, okay, if somebody says something, they've been there before, they've done it before, they've had success, I really take that into consideration and make sure that I'm being very coachable. And I think most people that do business with me or have seen what I've been able to accomplish, they said, man, that guy really, listens to folks. Well, it's because that day I got cut and sent back home to little Jefferson City, Missouri, and didn't know what to do with my life, is because I made a decision before I was out there that I was better than other people and I didn't need them. And today I don't do that. Those are the two biggest things for me, Joel, whenever I got cut from the NFL that I take away and implement, I think, on a regular basis now.
Do you miss it? Do you question anything? Or were you at peace with the way things went?
So being a football player, especially in the offensive line, you are banging your head against another 330-pound person, 100 times a day, and that your body takes a real beating whenever you're doing that. If I pull back my shirt, I've got a 3-inch scar here, 3-inch scar there. I've broken an ankle. I've torn a knee. All these fingers right here, they have all been bent out of location and messed up. So I would say the thing that I missed the most, and we chatted a little bit about this, was mostly just from college, was being able to work together, have all these people come from all these different places, backgrounds, everything, and then come together and work towards a common goal. That's really, really cool. It was a really great thing to be a part of. What I don't miss is kind of the monotony of going to practice and banging my body against somebody else's all the time. That was just kind of a means to the end for me. So I don't miss that part of it. My whole goal, whenever I was trying to get into to football was make the practice squad for 2 to 3 seasons, because that's about all you can. Maybe I get picked up by somebody, maybe I don't. Take that money and then go start my own business. And I really thought it was going to be in real estate. So I don't regret anything. I think God had a very clear plan for me, because I got to Kansas City and quickly met my now beautiful wife, and that got the second baby on the way. So I don't regret one thing at all. But it was difficult when I got cut, because I had identified as that athlete my whole life, and I didn't really know who Logan Freeman was at the core. So I had to do a lot of soul searching when I got cut.
Well, that's what I want to get to. And I've thought about, and maybe you know me a little bit, but my style is not to script everything out, because I just kind of like to see where it goes. In that sense, I'm envious of the podcasts that you do, and they're all different, but you have me on yours, and yours is more of like that rapid fire, here you go, and here's what it is, to the point where I would almost think about doing one of those at some point, like I need to add another podcast. But with this, it's kind of like wherever it goes, and what I like about your story is there's so many interesting angles to it. And so I do want to let everybody know that the end of this conversation, or as we get closer to it, will really be what Logan's doing today, which is big time stuff in the real estate world and investing. But I just think there's so many fascinating legs to your story, if that's the way to put it. And so here's a guy that was trying to live out that dream. It didn't last, but I know you end up going back, I think, and getting a master's, but you also deal with a lot of adversity in terms of job and family.
Sure.
I'll let you go whatever direction and where you want with it, but I know that the success that you're having today, and I'd call it early success, because I think there's a long, long ways to go. That's not to say you're not incredibly successful right now, but I think, and I'm sure you do too, that sky's the limit.
Right.
And you're still a young guy with a long ways to go, but as young as you are, it probably feels like a long journey to get to where you're at right now. So fill in some of those blanks in terms of personal and professional.
Absolutely. So, the day that I was cut from the NFL, I got back home. I got on the plane, got back home, and identifying as an athlete, your whole life, and having that kind of taken away from you, it can really wreck a lot of people, because you don't know what to do on a regular basis. Well, I was an ESPN all academic All-American with a few other guys at school. So one thing my mom always taught me was like, if you're going to go do something, you do it the best of your ability. And so I was, on the dean's list every single semester. And a lot of the guys drove that bachelor degree out, but, over 5 years. I had already started my master's degree and was, over 3/4 of the way done. And so, I talked to my agent, and, I just said, hey, look, man, I loved it out there. It was a great opportunity, but I don't feel like I'm called to continue to go down that path. And so I went back to school and finished my master's degree. And, I wasn't on a scholarship for the team anymore, so I had to get a job. So if anybody knows anything about Warrensburg, there's a small city about an hour away called Sweet Springs off I-70. So I would drive all the way down to Sweet Springs to my first business job, and I'd make over 250 cold calls a day, just on the phone, selling K through 12 data that this company scraped off of their websites. I'd sell it to vendors. It was crazy. But I had some success there because I wasn't afraid of hearing no on the phone. So I started to sharpen my skills. But what changed my life was that drive to and from, the business that I was working at. I listened to podcasts, I listened to audiobooks, and my mind just started to get expanded. And, when I went back, I would work 8 hours, and then I'd go to school from, 5:45 to 9 at night. And it was grueling, man. And I was a guy that was super serious about my health at the time. Like I said, I was 335 pounds. So I dropped down to 219 pounds in less than 6 months. So lost about 120 pounds, close to 120 pounds in about 6 to 7 months as well. But the day I graduated was really interesting because, you graduate, I needed to get out of the rat infested apartment that I could afford. So I had to get out of this apartment complex. And my father, who is like I mentioned to you, he's Native American, he's African American from North Carolina. And he grew up on a farm, tobacco farm. And they had 13 brothers and sisters living in one house there in North Carolina, Fairmont, North Carolina, very, very small place. And my dad was a strapping guy, jump, dunk a basketball, hit a golf ball 300 yards. He was a strapping guy. Well, he was helping me move my stuff out of the apartment, and he couldn't get up the stairs. And I was like, man, something's something's off. Like he's usually able to do some, at least get a basket of clothes down the stairs and up the stairs. So I was like, man, Dad, you feeling all right? He's like, no. It's like, all right, well, so I moved my whole apartment out and put it in his truck myself. But that was in December. And in January, well, we did Christmas together. My parents are divorced, so we did Christmas together. He came, and I knew he just didn't look right. My dad has battled, drugs and alcohol his whole life, addiction to drugs and alcohol, like heavily, and then got really hooked on pain medications as well. And so his liver was just shot. And, my dad has, he had a lot of troubles with that. I took him to rehab multiple times, had to, break down his apartment complex door to get him to the hospital in time. It's just a lot of different stuff that I've had to do with my dad there. But, I could kind of tell that something really wasn't right. So he came over for Christmas, and 2 days later, or 3 days later, I got a call from the hospital saying, hey, you guys need to get here really, really soon. And I was like, okay, but when you're in a position where somebody's chronically in the hospital, you don't take that stuff too serious. So I was like, all right, I'll be there. So I went, and then I talked to the doctors, and they said, you really need to get your family here. So my dad ended up having emergency surgery on his stomach and all this different stuff. He had a syndrome called cyclic vomiting syndrome, and it's a terrible thing to have, but it's stress induced. There's a couple other things that can induce it, but the pain, his liver he had liver cirrhosis as well, which is what happened was he had a stroke. And in a matter of 7 days, my dad went from a guy who moved me out of my, apartment complex or helped me to moving out of my apartment complex to passing away, and having a stroke and passing away in less than like 10 days. I think it was a total for my dad being here and not being here. So think about that. I got cut from the NFL, working full time, finished my master's degree, lost 100 pounds, didn't know who I was as a man, or I needed to find out who I was as a man. Then I lose my father to his battle for drugs and alcohol. So, if anybody's watching this video, you can see that I've got the Pope here and I've got my crucifix up top because, I took that time. I had some great mentors in my life that said, hey, you need to do two things. You need to dive back into your faith and not rely on yourself all the time. And you need to do some soul searching on who you want to be as a man. And so I have a few mentors that I still talk to this day that really helped direct me in the right way and get me on the right path to take that, lesson that I learned and cultivate it into something that would actually drive me and fuel me. And in my eulogy that I gave for my father, I said, Dad, you gave me the best lesson I've ever learned in life. And unfortunately, and this was in front of his whole family, and unfortunately, it was the way not to live life. And priorities matter. And your priorities, while you loved us kids and you loved my mom, your priorities were not in the right direction. And so I took that time, kind of recalibrated who I was, put some priorities in place. And that was, 7 years ago today, and so I've kind of taken those lessons that I've learned and hopefully made some good decisions along the way. So that's kind of what happened during that whole period of time. And I think, it has a lot to do with the man that I am today.
So, Logan, have you thought about a couple of things here? One, what would your dad think about the success you've now had and the man you've become? And two, and this, I'm covering a lot of ground here, but you
Sure.
talked about your dad's background. What would he think of what's going on right now?
Yeah.
With all of the racial injustice. By the way, the racial injustice, not that it's new, it I'm sure was a part of his life every day that he lived in some form or another.
Yep.
It feels like we're at a turning point here. I hope we're at a turning point. Mm-hmm. We'll see. It's certainly different. I think most people agree with that. So what would he think about the man you've become, and what would he think about what's going on in the country, if you've thought about that at all?
Yeah, one thing I pray about a lot is my dad never got to meet my beautiful wife who has had a huge impact on me or my children. And so I know that he's looking down and he's just smiling. One thing that my dad always told me, and so one thing I need to note too is like my dad did a lot of bad things, but he was a good man, and he did not direct himself in the right way. Before he passed away, I made a commitment to myself and to him that I was going to forgive him. So I was at peace with my father. I cannot say the same for my sisters and my mother, unfortunately. There was a lot of unfinished business, so to speak, with that. So I thank God to this day that I sat down with him, talked with him about this, and let him talk to me about it. And that really helped One thing I didn't mention was when he was passing away, I was trying to start a new job and I needed to go to Michigan. I delayed my Michigan trip by a week, then by 10 days. And the day I left, I said, Dad, okay, I said an Our Father with him. I said, I got to go. The doctors have told me that there's nothing that we can do. I prayed over him and then I left. 3 hours later, he passed away. So I know he was holding on to what we had and to what, life that he had left. But when I think about the man that I've become, it's because of a lot of it's because of him. Because early on, I remember him telling me, Logan, you can do anything that you want if you set your mind to it. And he would just tell me that over and over and over again. So when I wanted to be a baseball pitcher, he put a bag out on like a big tarp out on the metal chain link fence, and I couldn't stop throwing it into the dirt. I could throw fast, but I couldn't control it. So he said, stand right there, 45 feet away or whatever it was, I don't remember, and just throw balls. And so I threw so many baseballs that first week into that fence that it bent the metal fence. So it was a straight up fence like this. But it's still to this day. I went home last weekend. My mom still lives in that house. It's a C, and it just bowed out like that. He said, but you have to work at it, and you have to continue to do that. So my dad had a huge impact on me. I think he would be extremely proud of the man that I've become, and I miss him dearly. With what's going on in today's life, my dad grew up with you didn't know. Honestly, you didn't know people's backgrounds. Everybody kind of looked very ethnic where my dad was. They always were working outside. So I have a picture, I wish I could show it to you guys, of all my dad's brothers and sisters. There's guys that there's some of his brothers that look white. There's not white, but you know what I mean. Kind of look like me a little bit. There's guys that look from India. There's guys that look black. There's guys that look native. And he had two sisters, and they look extremely native. But like, you could not. I mean, this whole group of kids just all looked different. All of his friends were all black. Like they just didn't. They didn't have color out there. It was just I have all of his old yearbooks over here, and just kind of ringing through all of these yearbooks. I mean, there was honestly, to be white out there was kind of the minority where my dad grew up. So I think that what he would say right now is that a person is a person, Logan. And you are a man that you need to judge that person. It's not really your job to judge at all, but you're a man that needs to take that into consideration when you're dealing with people. And I think I have done that my whole life, at least to a certain extent. I mean, I have, and being on, at the Central Missouri, our teammates came, like I said, from everywhere. And, I think that my dad would say, look, you cannot look at somebody's skin color and make an assumption about them. Like, my dad had friends that I still know to this day that have moved to Missouri, and I know that they looked, they got a lot of looks. So my dad got a lot of looks whenever I was walking around with him, especially when he was out in the sun, because people would be like, "Is that your dad?" But there's pictures that I look at that me and my dad kind of look, somewhat similar. But my mom, 100% German, so like we took this, native ethnic guy, put him with a German, and you get a tan guy, And so I think that what he would say is like, Logan, you can't make a decision. You can't make an assumption based on what somebody looks like, on who they are as a man, a woman, anybody. And he instilled that in me at an early age. And I honestly, I've just never, and I know this isn't the right thing to say, but I've never looked at somebody that I have dealt with on a regular basis, or just in general, based off the color of their skin. It's how you show up. It's who you are as a man or a woman, what your values are, what your priorities are, and how you're living your life. That's what I kind of take into consideration when we're going out there. So I'll leave it at that, Joel. I think we're coming up on time. But I do think that my father's background has helped me in certain circumstances, especially with things like we're going through right now, to try to relate to them somewhat.
My friend Kiana Sinks, who I love, she watches every day, which is awesome. I've been on her podcast. Kiana, by the way, I'm going to reach out to you. I got to get you on mine soon too. But she said, thank you. Skin color is a non-factor. Don't discount me. And
That's
I
right.
always love putting up her messages. They're always inspiring. But I think about everything you just said, which is all about people, which pertains to just about any profession that you can get into.
Yep.
It's one of the things I talk about. It begins with people. It's what the late David Glass told me, and he was worth over $1 billion. It begins with people.
Absolutely.
So you're in the people business, the real estate business. How has everything you just talked about shaped you, or how much a part of what you do every day in investments, in real estate, has that affected you?
Yeah. Well, as an offensive lineman, if you guys know anything about football, you have a job to do every single play. If you're a running back, maybe you're taking a fake handoff, you can kind of take a play off. Wide receiver, you're running somebody off. All you got to do is run. Quarterbacks are typically on every single play, hopefully. But an offensive lineman, there's a man in front of you trying to beat you on a regular basis. And so our coaches would always instill in us that you cannot go up in the peaks and down in the valleys during the game. You have to stay very consistent. And if you go up in the peaks and valleys, you're going to have a hard time being an offensive lineman, because you have to do your job every time, no matter how bad or how good you did your job the play before. And so I've related that back in business. Like, there's a lot of things that can happen as an entrepreneur in the commercial real estate world that you don't have control of, unfortunately. But what you can do is show up and stay consistent on a regular basis. So that means treating people the right way. That means continually taking the actions. I call it, or Brian Tracy calls it, and I implement this, eating that frog, right? What's the hardest thing you've got to do today? Let's do that first. Let's get that win out of the way. And then the rest of the day, you let be crazy and whatever. But if you eat that frog first thing in the morning, you take it down, you've already won the day. So winning the day was a big motto for us in college. We call it WTD, win the day. And how do you win that day? You have to plan. You have to understand what you need to win, what you need to go after, but you also have to stay very consistent, because there's going to be a lot of external forces that come to you on a regular basis and have pressure that they put on you. It's how you react to that pressure is what your results are going to be. So what I've been able to do is everything that's been going on, ups, downs, everything. I'm just this guy, just the last, 3 years of my life that just shows up every single day, treats people right, takes that action, and eats that frog. And that has been very, very instrumental for us to kind of to get where we have been, and especially the last kind of 90 days. We've not listened to a lot of the economic noise, I'll call it, and we've just continued to continue to work that recipe of success that we've created for ourselves.
Well, because you are living free, I'll use your
That's
motto
right.
and your name. So live free. I love the fact that that's part of the questions part one of the questions that you ask your guests, and I love that, because I'd never been really asked that before about living free.
Yeah.
And there's a lot there. Certainly a lot. We could dig really deep on that, but tell me what you love so much about real estate. I ask all the time, what's your purpose? What gets you out of bed? And to me, that is purpose. That's the why.
Yeah.
What do you love, or why do you love real estate so much?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to my background with my last name being Freeman. And we talked a little bit about this, but at some point, my father's family, before him and before his dad, somebody was not free at some point. And when they did, they picked the name Freeman. And that's really, really cool. And so I've implemented that in my whole life as a motto. What can I do to live free? So you might not be a slave per se to a landowner anymore like that, but you might be a slave to a job. You might be a slave to some of your addictions. You might be a slave to somebody else, that you give power over yourself. And so for me, it's to have the discipline that creates freedom. And people think that discipline is this word that, is a bad word and all this thing. But I'll tell you what, having a regimented routine and staying disciplined on making those great choices around the values that you choose for who you to be as a person, that is what creates true freedom. Waking up every single day, knowing that my wife loves me, know that I have children that are, here that are looking up to me, knowing that I have a business and people and employees that are looking up to me on a regular basis. That gives me the drive to have that discipline to continue to kind of create this freedom for myself, because I know who I am as a person. And if I start to have somebody's thumb pushed on me, or I put myself in a bad position where I owe somebody something else, that's when bad decisions start to get made. And so, really trying to have that freedom of consciousness too, right? So making, good, moral, ethical choices. Somebody once said, if you never lie, you never have to remember what you said, right? But if you lie a whole bunch or tell somebody a bunch of bularchy, you have to remember all of this stuff. I don't have a big enough brain to store that. Or maybe it's all the concussions I've had from football, but I can't remember all of that stuff. So to me, discipline is what creates true freedom on a regular basis. And commercial real estate, I haven't invented the wheel. It just, that's been done for centuries now to create wealth through that vehicle. So I always say I'm a sales, marketing, professional development guy that is choosing commercial real estate as the vehicle right now. That's it. There's a lot of great vehicles out there. That's just the one that I was, drawn to and have created a business around.
And enables you still to be true to yourself, take care of people.
That's right.
And have fun, make money along the way, which is, something we all would like to be able to do. Final question, where then talked about your long journey, and it is just getting started. I'll pop up this message from Doug Bax, part of being accountable to yourself and others. He had sent something earlier saying Logan's a great person with a good story. So I wanted to throw that out there. And
one of the mentors that I mentioned earlier, that's him. That's Doug Bax. Doug Bax took me in his family, put me under their roof when my father was going through everything. Doug Bax is one of the reasons that I am the man that I am today. And he knows that, and I'm so glad that he's watching. That is so cool.
I'll be honest, and Doug, you'll laugh at this if you're still watching, and I think he's streaming on Facebook, was that he had typed in about a half hour ago. What he meant to say was Logan's a great person with a good story, but there were a couple of typos in there, which he realized I'm not making fun. That's me usually. I'm the guy that always has the typos.
Yeah.
And so he corrected it along the way, and so I figured that's a little bit clunky to pop up there. So when he popped this in there, it gave me a chance to put that back up. I had no idea your guys' connection. What's fun about this show is oftentimes when someone jumps in, especially via Facebook, sometimes it could be via Twitter, is sometimes it's the personal connection, and I always like just to see the reaction it gets from the guest, not knowing what the connection is. So great timing on that one. Doug, thanks for jumping in, and thanks obviously for being a part of this story. That's really cool to me just to see that reaction right there, because you didn't expect it
earlier, and I just didn't, because I didn't know if anybody would know who he was. But that is not a coincidence. That is super cool. One of his sons that was standing right next to him there, they're all 6'3", 6'6" guys. They're huge kids. But one of his sons is the best man in my wedding. Still my best friend to this day. He's one of these guys. I can't tell, but that's really cool, Joe. I'm so glad that you did that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad, and Doug, I'm glad that you sent that in. That's what this is all about. Part of the living free for me. He said, I know we're wrapping up on our time. I told you 30-ish, 40, whatever. I get to say in all this. It's my choice. So that's the beauty of it. And once I go back to my other job, this will continue, by the way, too. But once maybe the time's left to move a little bit. But when I go back to that other job, then I'm on their time, and this is when you hit the commercial break. But I get that choice right now. So the final question was going to be, where do you see all this going? What are your grand visions for the future? Because you're a guy that is, if I remember correctly, what are we talking about, around 29 or something like that?
30, or 30 this year.
Okay. Yeah, so you got a long ways to go. I kind of remember 30. My wife is still 29 every single year. We know that one. But what are your grand visions?
So, being a first generation Kansas City, and legacy is extremely important to me. And I've got some really great mentors here with last names that everybody would probably recognize. And so I've seen what can happen after, generation after generation. So I'm really working to build that legacy in Kansas City. However, I feel called to help the homelessness the issue here in Kansas City, Missouri. And so we've got a couple foundations that we work with on a regular basis. We created one in our church. It's called Care Kit KC. So we pack all of these bags, and we have our families. The kids pack them, and they take them home, and they put them in their cars, and they give the homeless, the food that they need. They give them bus passes, all this different stuff. So we're teaching kids that that are like we talked about, white privileged kids, because I go to visitation on the plaza, that not everybody has that, and that you need to meet people where they're at. So that's one big thing that we've done. And I know Mark Basola. Mark invited me to be a member. I'm so glad that he did, of a board of directors from a foundation here called a nonprofit called Restart. And so I'm heavily involved with Restart's success going forward, using commercial real estate, buying properties and master leasing them to Restart's clients, which Restart helps the homeless population in Kansas City not only get housing, safe, affordable housing for themselves, but they help them with the services that they need to get reintegrated back into life. And so I'm heavily involved in that. And I would love to see that not only blossom across the city continually, but figure out how I can continue to make connections for Restart and the homeless population here in Kansas City. It's something that drives me on a regular basis.
Man, I'm inspired hearing about it all. It's awesome. Yeah. And, I tell this to so many people, especially when they're younger, like you're just getting started.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. And, and look, you can still get started at 35, 40, 45. I mean, shoot, I feel like I refound myself at about 45 just with the speaking and the podcasts and all that. I don't know where it's all going. I know that it's energizing. And ultimately, in the end, when you feel like you got a chance to help people and do something and make an impact and perhaps leave a legacy, that to me is enough to get out of bed every single day. And I think that's what you believe in. So I know that if people want to reach out, they can learn more at livefreeinvestments.com. Is that the best way to get you?
That's the best way.
And the podcast, let everybody know about the podcast.
Yeah. So we have a what I'll call a bite-sized chunk podcast, which allows people to get exposure to a lot of great people in my network, and then they can go find them, because most of these folks that I have on have some sort of platform that they can go reach out to. So that's called the Live Free Investor Podcast. We have 2 episodes. We're not daily. I don't. You're a beast, Joel. You're a beast, man. So we do Tuesday and Thursday. So there's new podcast episodes released every Tuesday and Thursday, and they're all on YouTube as well.
Yeah, you got stuck with some old guy with white hair coming up pretty soon too, I believe, right?
You'll go out next week, man. So.
All right, next week. So check that out. Check out all the other ones. Logan, you've inspired me, and I'm excited just to one, see where it is all going to go. 2, I'm excited about a new and emerging friendship. I love that. I mean, you and I had a chance to be connected, and I think Cody Isabel connected us, and then we had a chance to spend some time in this Zoom world that we all live in, and then the podcast, mine and yours today. And so I'm excited to see where that goes too, and really appreciative of not just your time, but of your willingness to be vulnerable, to be candid, and to share. I know a lot of personal tragedy, triumphs, and everything along the way, and I know that that's not an easy thing to do. I think you're comfortable sharing it, but I'm grateful that you were willing to do it.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right, Logan, thanks a lot. Hang tight for just a second as we'll wrap things up here. And great to visit with Logan here. And he mentioned the name Mark Basola. Mark is a guy that is over at Enterprise Bank and Trust. So a big thanks to them for their partnership with me. And I want to remind you, if you like steaks and beef, Wagyu beef, from a veteran-owned and operated company, check out Casey Cattle Company. They're in Western Missouri. They will deliver to you here in Kansas City or to all 50 states for those that are watching beyond the Kansas City area. And then you can wash it down if you're here in the area, especially if you're in Johnson County. JJ's Wine and Spirits, great personal touch there, southwest corner of College and Antioch. So I hope that you will look at them. Wine Wednesdays, 15% off bottles of wine if you want to get back there next Wednesday, or just go in on any day. I think it'll be worth the experience. That's going to do it for this episode. Got a big panel discussion tomorrow, just about, and we're going to continue some of the race discussion, the injustices in this country. But I'm going to visit with 3 very successful professionals and talk to them about challenges of being black in the business world, in Kansas City and beyond, what hurdles they've had to overcome, where they see things right now. I've got a phenomenal panel of guests tomorrow. I'm so excited about that and to have that discussion. But as for today, I hope you have a good rest of your Thursday. Thanks to Logan Freeman. I'm Joel Goldberg, and hope to catch you tomorrow on Rounding the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust.